Welcome to Healthy Mama Hacks, a weekly mini podcast where I share my best tips for hacking your healthy mama life with simple tips for easier eating, cooking, and living a healthy mama life in 20-ish minutes, about the time it takes you to fold a load of laundry. So let's do this, mama. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Healthy Mama Hacks. Today we are digging into the second in my grocery guides. Last week we dug into Trader Joe's. I started by talking about why I'm kind of doing this series and what our food values are and how we shop at these four main grocery stores within a budget that works for us, looking for food that is a quality that feels good for us, that is somewhat environmentally friendly. Those are kind of the main things that I look for. So I did a deep dive into Trader Joe's, why I love it, the things that I buy, the things that I don't buy there, my favorites, staples, fun items, all of those things, because that is my number one favorite grocery store for the reasons I mentioned in that episode. And I will link that down below if you haven't yet listened to that episode. But today we are going to dig into my second favorite grocery store, and the second grocery store, actually the grocery store that I probably shop at most often, because like I mentioned in the last episode, I really only shop at Trader Joe's once a month, sometimes twice a month. I do a big stock up there because it is a little far from my house, and getting up and down the stairs with 4 or 5 bags of groceries and 2 kiddos can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes as well. We live in the second floor of a low-rise apartment complex. So, we don't do Trader Joe's a ton, but Aldi is actually pretty darn close to our house, and I love Aldi for many reasons. So we go to Aldi pretty often, almost every single week. For those of you who aren't yet familiar with Aldi or who haven't ventured there very much, I know I've talked to my mom about Aldi a few times, and she has one pretty close to her house, which means, yes, it's down the street from Trader Joe's, but it's just a little bit further than Trader Joe's. And I'm like, you've got to go to Aldi because some things are just so much more worth it there. It is a German grocery chain that's in the Trader Joe's family. And the thing that's great about Aldi is that the cost of many of the items at Aldi is really low because they use a model where they save money on things like having people bag your groceries. You have to use a quarter to get your own cart, so there aren't people to chase the carts around the parking lot. They also require you to bring your own bags, or you have to purchase their bags, and most of the items are store brand. They do have some kind of commercial brand items. I don't know if that's the right word, but those are mostly kind of in like the seasonal section and things like that. For the most part, they have their own store brand for most items. And much like Trader Joe's does, Trader Joe's, I think, has more of a mix, but you know how Trader Joe's has their, Trader Jose's and oh my gosh, I can't even think of the different cuisines that they use, but they have all of the, different the different store brand stuff. And then they're kind of mixed with name brand items. There's mostly store brand at Aldi. But the quality is still pretty darn good for most of their items. And I'll share with you, just like I did in the last episode, why I love it, and the things I do buy and the things I don't buy for those reasons that I mentioned, for quality reasons, for budget reasons, and for environmental reasons. So I think that, the number one reason why I love Aldi is for convenience. If we're being honest, it's very close to my house. So convenience is number one, but number two is for the cost. I think the cost of most items at Aldi is unbeatable in a lot of instances, especially because the quality is pretty good as well. So that would be the other thing. The quality is pretty high for the cost. On most items, and I'll share which ones I don't think it's worth it, but they do have high standards for the most part, very similar to Trader Joe's. They don't use like artificial coloring in their brand items. They do use things like that obviously they're not producing the name brand items, so there are some items that, do use those type of things. But for the most part, they don't use things like artificial coloring, and they're really moving towards a model that is more environmentally friendly from everything that I've heard. So I think they have pretty good standards as well. They're really inexpensive and it's convenient for me. So those are the main reasons why I love Aldi. And if you have an Aldi in your area, I recommend just checking it out because it's such a different shopping experience because you're not looking for those name brands. You're kind of going through the brands that they have and figuring out what might be the foods that you want to try. And you might discover some new favorites. So some of the things that I love to buy at Aldi, a lot of my staples I buy at Aldi, like I'll talk about when I talk about Thrive Market in a couple weeks. I do get a lot of my staples from Thrive Market just because it's easy, it's convenient, I can auto ship them. But if you don't want to use a service like that, for those of you who don't know, Thrive Market is an online grocery store. So if you don't want to use a service like that, Aldi is great because a lot of their kind of staple items are pretty inexpensive. And I find even less expensive than Trader Joe's in most cases. So that's kind of a toss-up where I buy things like that. So if I go to Trader Joe's and I do a big stock up at the beginning of the month, a lot of these staple items, plus Thrive Market, a lot of these staple items I don't need to get at Aldi, but in a pinch, if I need something like canned beans or canned tomatoes, or I need rice or something like that, the price at Aldi, that's the place I'm going to run to. I'm not going to go to your kind of standard grocery store because it's going to be way too expensive. So things I do buy at Aldi. I buy some produce items at Aldi. I do find that the quality of the produce items at Aldi has improved a lot in the last couple of years. So we've lived in our apartment now for almost 4 years. It'll be 4 years in September. And that was about when I started shopping at Aldi, when I kind of discovered it. I had a friend mention it to me and I was like, oh, I've never checked it out. And she's like, oh my gosh, you have to. I save so much on my groceries at Aldi. So the produce items, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, I didn't buy as much. And I mentioned this in the last episode, but we love to buy organic when we can, but it's not our number one. Number one would be if we can buy local, that's great. But I would rather be eating more vegetables than obsessing over them being organic. Those are our personal food values. It's whatever works for you. But we do like to buy organic when we can, and I do find that they have quite a few organic items at pretty good prices as well. Some of them aren't great prices. Like I find their organic broccoli to be a bit expensive, things like that. I mean, I'm sure if it was in season, it might be less expensive. But one of the things that I love about Aldi is that they always have either in season or produce items that they have an abundance of on sale. So they always have produce items on sale, and if that's a produce item that you love, it's great to stock up on. You know, they'll have things like blueberries for $1.99, these like big containers of blueberries, and we just wash them really well. And would organic be ideal? Yeah, totally. But I'd rather my kids be eating blueberries than not, you know? So that's my opinion on that. But I just check for quality. And for the most part, some of the things I buy on the regular at Aldi, lemons are a pretty good price at Aldi. They're still less expensive at Trader Joe's, but if I'm going to Aldi, their lemons are a really good price. Their citrus fruit, their apples are a good price. Tomatoes are usually pretty good and they're a good price as well. Avocados are probably like the best deal of anything in the produce section. Their avocados are usually really inexpensive. And then anything in season, like I mentioned, those are going to be less expensive. So like you can get spaghetti squash for pennies on the pound when it's in season. So I love getting things like butternut squash and spaghetti squash. Also, onions and sweet potatoes are really inexpensive, and so I'll get those at Aldi as well. Now, the thing about Aldi is that they're not always fully stocked, and that might just be my Aldi. But sometimes I go and there's this like abundance of produce and there's tons of items to choose from, and sometimes it's slim pickings. So the downside of Aldi is that I can't go expecting to get everything on my list. And so that does leave me in a little bit of a pinch. Like Trader Joe's is a smaller grocery store, but I can still get pretty much everything on my list no matter what. Aldi doesn't have things like fresh herbs. They do have fresh cilantro for a really good price. I think it's like 89 cents. But they don't have basil and they don't have parsley and they don't have thyme. They don't have fresh herbs like that. So that's something I always have to go to another store for. I find that their salads, kind of like Trader Joe's, a lot of them come in really small packages, and it's just a lot of packaging, and they don't last super long. And I usually eat more than would be in, like, I would probably eat an entire bag myself because I love greens. And so they do have a large box of spring mix that I buy often if we're going to do a lot of salads, but they only have spinach in small containers. And so things like that, I don't tend to buy a lot of greens there, but things like fruit, especially in season, and then a lot of kind of your standard vegetables. Last year, they had zucchini on sale for like 19 cents. And so I stocked up on zucchini and froze a ton of it because I love in the summertime when zucchini's on sale or it's in season, I love putting it in my smoothies, kind of like I do cauliflower rice, and it just makes my smoothies creamy. And I know those of you are like, oh, gross. It really doesn't taste like anything. So I'll steam it, freeze it, and I steam it for gut health, but you can totally eat it raw if it feels fine for your gut. And I have that for my smoothies, and it makes a great smoothie bowl. So that's something that I love to buy at Aldi. Something else, if we're going to be doing any baking, you guys know I'm all about balance, and I love making kind of quote unquote healthier baked goods. So it's always fun to make things with alternate flours. So almond flour, which they do have sometimes at Aldi. I don't love the quality, to be honest. I love making things with coconut flour and cassava flour. But if we're going to eat those things as snacks, I love making it with those higher quality flours just because there's some more. And when I say higher quality, I'm just talking about nutrient density. Just because there's a, kind of a higher nutrient density. So if they're going to be muffins that we're going to eat for breakfast or snacks, I love just using those alternate flours. It's an easy swap, and, they feel a little bit better in our body. It's a little bit more balanced for our blood sugar, but treats are treats. So I'm not worrying about the flour and the sugar and the things like that I buy because it's a treat. It just is what it is. We're not going to be eating it 3 times a day. It's going to be, something that we have as an after lunch or after dinner snack or something, or when we want a little treat, something like that. So their baking supplies are really inexpensive. So everything from vanilla extract to flour to sugar. So those things, when I'm going to be doing baking, especially around the holidays, that's the place I go to. I buy organic milk and shredded cheese there. Now, the shredded cheese is small. The bags are small, especially if you're buying organic. I mentioned that one of my food values is organic dairy, just because it feels better for me and my hormones. So it's not my favorite place to buy shredded cheese. If you are fine with non-organic dairy, then the shredded cheese is a really good price. They have like a really fun selection of cheese. So similar to Trader Joe's, they oftentimes have seasonal cheeses that we choose from, and it's a great place to make a little quick cheese board, charcuterie board. They have a lot of charcuterie items as well. Their prosciutto is really good. So that stuff is really fun to get. They're not necessarily our staples, but they do have good cheese items, and I find their organic milk is pretty inexpensive as well. So if you guys drink milk, or if you need it for baking or cooking or whatever, their organic milk is pretty inexpensive as well. Eggs, they oftentimes have pasture-raised eggs, which is awesome, and I find their eggs are a good price, so I'll buy eggs from there sometimes if I haven't bought them at Trader Joe's. Their almond and oat milk are a great price, and I love that they have really simple ingredients. They don't have a ton of stuff in them. So they have sweetened and unsweetened, and so I definitely buy those from there if I'm not going to make it myself, which honestly lately I haven't been making it myself just because it's been easier to grab, and I'm just in a season of convenience, and that's one of those things I just choose convenience with. And sometimes they even have my favorite Califia toasted coconut almond milk. That is like my absolute favorite nut milk of all time, and when they have it, I grab a couple bottles. Oftentimes I get it at BJ's, which is it's kind of like a Sam's Club or a Costco. And I won't do a full grocery guide, at least not right now, to BJ's / Costco / Sam's Club because I don't shop there very often, just because we don't have a ton of room to buy things in bulk, but my dad and I share a membership, and so we do buy stuff from there sometimes. But the prices at Aldi, if they have it there, are even better than the bulk store. That's why I wanted to mention that. We buy ketchup at Aldi most of the time. Like I mentioned in the last episode, my oldest daughter is sensitive to corn, so we can't buy anything with high fructose corn syrup in it. So they have a great organic ketchup that's just made with sugar. Honey and maple syrup are pretty inexpensive at Aldi, so we tend to buy those there as well. No, it's not the highest quality maple syrup ever, but especially when I'm using it in baking, and my in-laws haven't been in town to give us some of the amazing Canadian maple syrup. We get that from there. Their spices are a really good price, similar to Trader Joe's. They're on par with Trader Joe's. They don't have as many. I tend to buy their organic spices because I do find them higher quality than the less expensive, just conventional ones. And spices are concentrated, so I do like to buy organic spices when I can. So their spices are good, but I tend to buy the organic. So they have a smaller selection, but I do buy spices there on occasion. Their coconut oil is a good price. Their olive and avocado oil, again, like Trader Joe's, Trader Joe's has better bottles of olive oil because they have larger bottles, and so therefore they are less expensive per ounce. But in a pinch, they've got a great organic olive oil and avocado oil for good prices as well. They always have grass-fed butter. Sometimes they have Kerrygold, but they also recently came out with their own grass-fed butter, and we love butter on our sourdough, and so I love getting grass-fed butter. It's just a little bit higher in nutrients, and I find it tastes better when it's grass-fed, so that's why I prefer grass-fed butter. Their applesauce packets and their applesauce tubs, we always buy those for the kids because my kids go through fruit so fast. Like berries are in and out of our house, apples, oranges, whatever we buy, they eat it so fast. And I'm not going to argue with my kids loving fruit. So oftentimes we will have applesauce on hand just for a quick option if they want some fruit or something alongside a lunch or something on the go. So we often buy the applesauce there, really great prices. They store brand bars are pretty inexpensive there as well. We don't buy a ton of bars because they are expensive overall, but they have knockoff Layera bars, knockoff Cliff bars, knockoff RX bars. I'm trying to think of other like Luna bars. They have all of those bars and I haven't tried all of them, but they are pretty inexpensive. String cheese is inexpensive. I'm not sure if they have an organic string cheese. I can't remember because we always buy ours at Trader Joe's. But that's a good one to buy there. I know that that's less expensive. Pasta and pasta sauce. This is the place to get pasta and pasta sauce. Now, it is a good price at Trader Joe's, but I find Aldi is the best. Grains, they're a pretty good price. Most of them come in small bags if you want to get organic, but if it doesn't matter to you, they do have larger bags of rice, so that's a good price. Peanut butter is a pretty good price, though I will tell you about almond butter in a second. Almond butters I don't because it is just not a great price there. Canned beans and canned tomatoes, they have some organic selection there, but either way, they're a good price. Their tortillas are a really good price. Actually, they have a really great like Latin American section at my not Trader Joe's, at my Aldi. I'm not sure if they have one at yours, but they have got some really great items there. One of my favorites is tagine, tahine. Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. I do not speak Spanish at all. And so I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but it's a chili lime seasoning that is just absolutely delicious on everything from chicken to the rim of a margarita. Try it. Thank me later. It's so good. Kombucha and Perfect bars. I mentioned these at Trader Joe's, but as like fun little treats that are normally more expensive, love getting a good kombucha or a Perfect bar at Aldi. And then seasonal items are definitely a do at Aldi because they have a lot of fun, both name brand seasonal items and then their brand seasonal items. So around Christmas time, they have a lot of fun treats that are seasonal items. And oftentimes the seasonal items are also on sale as well. So some of my don'ts at Aldi. I need to be better about just sticking to the do's and sticking to the don'ts, but we're about grace around here. So bagged salads, like I mentioned, I like Trader Joe's bagged salads better in general, and I find them pretty pricey. So sometimes we'll buy them, just convenience sake, but for the most part, I find the Trader Joe's quality better, and I find them just as expensive. So, you are paying for the convenience of the bag salad. So if we're going to choose them, we choose them, but meh. Meat and lunch meat. So let's talk about meat at Aldi for a second because some people love it because it is really inexpensive. However, I have not found the quality to be that great, with the exception of their grass-fed ground beef is a great price, and I have had no problem with the quality. So when it's on sale, sometimes they'll do these packs, like it's called a family pack, and there's like 4 pounds or something of grass-fed ground beef for like $18. It's a great deal, and I'll get it and I'll freeze it. Like I've mentioned before, we normally get our meat from Butcher Box, but so yes, you can buy it in bulk. And if that's not a value for you, buying kind of organic or grass-fed meat, then it's a great place to get it in larger quantities for less expensive. But I haven't found the qualities that great. I've bought it a few times there and I've had to return it more than once just because it's like I take it out of the package and it's not great. So I'm not a huge fan of the meat at Aldi. Yes, it is a better price, but in terms of quality, it's not our preferred. Lunch meat at Aldi is okay, but the packaging there's so much packaging and there's so little in there that I prefer Trader Joe's, or I'll get it from the bulk store like I mentioned. Ours is called BJ's. Frozen fruit, I also don't think is worth it because the bags are really small. You don't get much in them and the price is pretty high. So I don't think that's worth it. Almond butter, tiny jars. The almond butter is okay in terms of taste. Like it's not my favorite, but it's super expensive. So I don't think it's worth it. Chips, I'm not a huge chip person because I am, like my daughter, is sensitive to corn, sensitive to potatoes. It's like the only food sensitivity that's really stuck around with my gut health stuff. The kettle chips, my husband has said, are really good, but everything else, people are like, it's not really worth it. And I mean, it's a snack food. It's not a staple, but just to throw that out there. Coffee, we've gotten coffee at Aldi. You guys know I love coffee. I don't find the quality of any of the coffee I've tried there is all that great, and it's not any less expensive than buying it at Trader Joe's or getting it at Thrive Market. So I don't think the coffee is worth it. They do have inexpensive K-Cups if you have a Keurig, so that is an option. But we have an espresso as well as like a French press. And okay, we probably shouldn't go into how many coffee makers I have because that's embarrassing. But we don't have a Keurig anymore because ours died. So they don't have K-Cup, Nespresso pods as far as I know. I mentioned this, but they don't have fresh herbs, so don't go looking for them there. And their cereal is a toss-up. They have some good basic cereals, and the price for the cereals is really good, but some of them taste like the normal, like your name brand cereals, and some of them do not. We don't eat a lot of cereal in our house just because it's not very protein rich, and so it doesn't really keep the kids very long for breakfast, and I'm all about blood sugar balance for kids and myself. So I don't think cereal is bad, but it's not our go-to. So it's more of a snack food in our house. So we don't get a ton of cereal from there. We'd rather get it at Trader Joe's, or I'll mention a couple of brands I like from Thrive Market when I talk to you guys about Thrive Market. So let's talk about my all-time favorites at Aldi. Okay. First favorite is either the cauliflower or the multigrain tortilla chips. I love a good tortilla chip and some guac, and they have cauliflower tortilla chips, which are corn-free for my corn-free little one, and then they also have a multigrain tortilla chip that is just super tasty, and I think both of those are organic. I'm not sure, but we like grabbing those, and so we get those pretty much every time. Sometimes a couple of bags. The second thing, let's talk about guac. Their guacamole packs are great. I love making homemade guac, but it is so convenient to have something in your fridge when you just want some chips and guac, or you want it for nachos or something like that, because those cauliflower or multigrain tortilla chips also work great for nacho night. They come in 2 packs, and I find the guac is it's really tasty. So we get the guac often. I love Veggie Burgers as a quick and convenient lunch option, and their earth-grown Veggie Burgers, the quinoa crunch, there's like a black bean one. I think they're great. I love to keep them in the freezer and for just a quick lunch option, usually over some sort of a salad. So those are one of my favorites. I love those. For those of you who are gluten-free, they've got a great gluten-free selection, and their gluten-free everything bagels are delicious. I've gotten them several times. I'm not totally gluten-free, but I don't eat a ton of gluten that hasn't been fermented. Like I prefer sourdough just for my gut health, and it just works for me. And their gluten-free everything bagels are great when you're craving a bagel. You guys may or may not know that I'm a little bit obsessed with sparkling water. I'm not great at drinking water, but I do drink a lot of sparkling water, and it helps me keep my hydration up. Their Belle-Vie sparkling flavored water is very similar to La Croix, and there's also, or LaCroix, whatever you want to call it. They also have that there sometimes, that brand, but the Belle-Vie is great, and we get it often. They have great chicken sausage. It's not as great as Trader Joe's, but their spinach and feta chicken sausage especially is definitely one of my tops, and I buy it often when we go to Aldi. I already mentioned tagine or tahine. Somebody, you can correct me. whoever is listening and you're like, come on, Chris. It's not an Aldi item, but it's hard to find around here. I've never seen it at any other grocery store around here. So I really love it. And I always keep it on hand for, like I said, I love using it for chicken. I love using it. If you guys have suggestions for other things to use it for, other than spicy margs and chicken, those are my favorites. Okay, you guys, take and bake pizza. All of them. Their take and bake pizza, they have a cauliflower crust one now, which is kind of fun. Some extra veggies there. And that one I believe is gluten-free. So that's great for those gluten-freers in our community. Gluten-freers? Okay, it's a thing. I'm going with it. But their take and bake pizzas, we love to do like a Saturday night take and bake pizza if we're not making our own homemade. Theirs are delicious. They're like $5.99 and they're gigantic and they're really tasty. So take and bake pizza, definitely my top 10. For a fun little treat, their toasted coconut cookie thins. Oh my gosh, it is like a little crispy macaroon. And they just started doing some work outside, so it might get a little loud, so I'm going to start to wrap this up. But my number 10, you guys, you know I love grabbing a little treat when I go to the grocery store, and so I always grab a kombucha and a Perfect Bar because Perfect Bars are $1.99, and any of you who are Perfect Bar fans like I am, they're so expensive, but they're such a delicious bar, and so it's fun to grab one for a snack and have that when I'm going grocery shopping. It's a little it's a little bit more expensive, but it's a little treat yourself when we go out grocery shopping. So those are my top 10 at Aldi. Those are the things that I do buy at Aldi, the things that I don't buy at Aldi. So let's talk about some tips and tricks. Oh my gosh, you guys, I forgot. There is a bonus favorite item. This is a seasonal item, so just like the Trader Joe's chocolate covered peppermint JoJo's, which are my favorite, probably like one of my favorite treats, definitely my favorite packaged treat. But these are probably number 2. They have these Belgian cocoa dusted truffles that like melt in your mouth around the holidays. They come, knock on wood every holiday season, and they are delicious. So look out for those around the holidays. They're amazing. Okay, tips and tricks for Aldi before I have to sign off in case this is loud. Number 1, you need a quarter. You need a quarter to go to Aldi, and I can't tell you how many times I've searched through my car, and I try to keep my car pretty darn clean, and I have a spot for quarters, but every so often we use them. Remember a quarter when you go to Aldi. Every so often they sell these like little keychains, and I need to buy one where you can kind of put the quarter in there so you always have a quarter for Aldi. So the quarter is for the grocery cart. You stick it in to this little slot in the grocery cart and it unlocks it. So all the grocery carts lock into each other. And so you can unlock it and then you can use the grocery cart, but that's the only way you can use a grocery cart. Otherwise, you have to walk through the store with armfuls of groceries. And we all know how that feels when you're like, I'm just going in for 2 things. And then all of a sudden you're like carrying 50 pounds of groceries and you're like, I made a mistake. The second thing is that you do have to bag your own groceries. They will not bag your groceries for you. You basically, when you go through the checkout, you put everything on the whatever is it called, the conveyor belt? Yeah, you put everything on the conveyor belt and it goes down and you put your cart at the end and they throw everything in the cart and then you go off to the side and bag your own groceries, and you've got to bring your own bags or you have to pay for the bags. And I think it's very inexpensive. It's like maybe 7 cents. They have paper bags, they have plastic bags, but so they have the bags there for you, but you have to pay for them. And I'm used to that because that's what they used to do in Toronto. I think plastic bags are outlawed there. But here you have to pay for your bags. They're not like outlawed, but you have to pay for them if you want them. The third thing is you won't always find everything. I did kind of mention this before, but most items are at Aldi, but not everything is there. So they don't always have all the produce items you want because it is a smaller grocery store. They don't always have things like they don't have herbs. They're not always going to have all of the kind of dry good items that you want. They have a great selection, but you might find yourself going to another store. So just be prepared. You might have to take a quick trip to another store as well. But for me, I kind of know what's there at this point because I go so often. So I'm going there for specific items. So I know if I'm going to be able to find something or not. So we don't necessarily do a stock up at Aldi, but we do kind of our in-between shops at Aldi for most of the things we need. Another tip or trick, they have 3 categories or 4 categories of items. They have their like regular items they always have. They have seasonal items. They have specials. And so they do have sales. They'll have things that are on special. And so oftentimes that's a great time to stock up on something you love when it's on special. Sometimes they're worth it. Sometimes it's like, 10 cents off. And maybe that's worth it to you, but I don't necessarily stock up on something that's only 10 cents off, but if it's a really good price, you can stock up on it. And then they also have limited edition items. So a lot of their seasonal items are limited edition. They also have a whole section of kind of home products and kids' toys and things like that. We've definitely found fun toys for our kids and homeschool things and things like that every so often there. Sometimes they'll have pots and pans and things like that you can get there. I can't speak to the quality of them, but I have a whole episode on my kitchen essentials. If you are curious about that, that'll be linked down below in the description. But the limited items are literally limited. And what they've told me at Aldi is they get in a shipment of them and they don't know if they will ever get in another shipment back. Sometimes those limited edition items are literally what you see in front of you. So if you want them, grab them. And seasonal items, same thing. It's usually for a season. Sometimes there's a restock, sometimes there's not, but they'll be there throughout the season and then they're gone until the next season, maybe. A couple other fun things. They have a great gluten-free section, or selection. So if you're gluten-free, they've got great gluten-free wraps. They've got gluten-free mac and cheese. They've got gluten-free bagels, like I mentioned. Sometimes they have gluten-free muffins. They have gluten-free baking mixes. So they've got a great gluten-free selection. And as far as I've tried, the quality is really good as well. I love their spinach wraps. Their gluten-free spinach wraps are really good. And their bagels, like I mentioned. They have gluten-free granolas, lots of gluten-free items. They've got a pretty good frozen section, though I didn't really mention frozen vegetables. I do find the bags of frozen vegetables pretty small. The quality's okay. Typically, I go to Trader Joe's for those things, but there are a lot of pretty inexpensive frozen convenience items. If you like those type of things, there's a good selection of those. There's a great German selection because they are a German brand. So if you love German foods, they have German condiments. They've got pickled beets and sauerkraut, and they have German seasonings and German coffee and different, oh my gosh, I cannot speak German at all. And one of my best friends has a degree in German. And so I'm not going to try and butcher any of the German names for the foods. So they've got a huge German selection. And those are the main things I think I wanted to share with you guys about Aldi. Those are some tips and tricks, my do's and don'ts, my favorite items from Aldi, and why I love it. We shop at it very often. I think it's a great, if you have one in your area. I don't know if it's something that I would go out of my way to take a long trip for, but it is a great inexpensive grocery store if you have that option available to you. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you're enjoying this grocery guys series. Next week, we're going to talk about Whole Foods. I know that you guys want to hear what I do and don't buy at Whole Foods because it's oftentimes thought of as a very expensive grocery store, but it definitely does not have to be. And I've got some great tips for shopping on a budget at Whole Foods. So we'll talk about that next week. And as always, come and find me over on Instagram at Healthy Mama Chris. If I missed anything from my list, if there are Aldi items that you love and Aldi items you think I need to try, you need to reach out to me, send me a DM at Healthy Mama Chris. Tell me what I missed. Tell me what I need to try. Tell me what you disagree with. If you're like, those are gross, don't. Why do you like those? I would love to hear it. I just love to talk to you guys. And join us over in the Healthy Balanced Mamas Facebook community. I am always trying to increase some engagement over there and really connect with you guys. So that's just facebook.com/group/Healthy Balanced Mamas. And we can talk about this episode. We can talk about our favorites from Trader Joe's and Aldi and Whole Foods and Thrive Market and all of the places. Okay, friends, have a beautiful weekend and I will catch you guys next week. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Healthy Balanced Mama podcast. If you loved it, would you take a screenshot and share it with a friend over on Instagram and tag me in it? It helps me so much to know what you love and are taking away from each episode. If you really loved it, would you hop over to iTunes and give me a star rating and review? Every rating and review helps this podcast be seen and heard by more women who need to hear the message of balance and wellness without deprivation. It's the best free gift you could give me. And as a reminder, the information and opinions on this podcast are meant for education and inspiration only and are not to be taken as medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please consult with a trusted practitioner before making any changes. Have a beautiful day, friend, and I'll see you in the next episode.